I'm Dean Newland, and welcome to the Business of Intuition, where I coach, facilitate, train, and speak on the hard science and meaningful experience of intuitive leadership in business, so you can make better decisions, forge real connections, and creatively solve problems to amplify your impact and simplify your life. Welcome to the Business of Intuition.
We've heard it over and over again. The world is changing faster than ever before. And in this rapidly evolving and changing world, the challenges we face externally have seamlessly infiltrated our organizations. This shift demands that leaders acquire a new set of skills to navigate and thrive. Among these essential skills are the ability to build meaningful and high-performing cultures within hybrid work environments, and discovering innovative methods to engage people across any setting. To illustrate this, consider the assessment of a meeting or project through a prioritized lens, ensuring the right people are involved, employing the right processes, the utilization of the right tools and technology. And this approach ensures efficiency and effectiveness. This particular process is going to be discussed more by my upcoming guest. Another one that he shared had to do with a very authentic type of dialogue that could be used at the beginning and end of any meeting. For example, how are you all showing up? And conclude with, how are you all leaving the meeting? This practice encourages openness and reflection, creating more connected and engaged teams. As leaders, mastering these and other skills will not only address the current challenges, but also pave the way to a resilient and dynamic organizational culture. And culture really is the topic of the day on the Business of Intuition. My guest is a guy named Chris Dyer, and he is a recognized company culture and remote work expert. As a former CEO managing thousands of people, his companies consistently were named a best place to work. They have also been named a fastest growing company by Inc. magazine 5 times. And Chris routinely counsels and speaks, and Inc. magazine ranked him as the #1 leadership speaker in culture. He has 3 best-selling books, one of which is called The Power of Company Culture and Remote Work. And he is a top 50 voices in leadership, a top 40 change management guru leaders, a top 50 global thought leader. The list goes on and on. As a keynote speaker, his goal is to inspire audiences with a straightforward delivery, insightful candor, and engaging humor. Countless companies have unlocked productivity and performance and profits by implementing his quote-unquote 7 pillars strategy. Mr. Chris Dyer on the Business of Intuition. Well, Chris, it's great to have you on the show. And I know that you're a big culture man. Certainly, we're going to talk about what is a high-performing culture, but let's do some level setting. How do you define culture? I find that people have a very different set of definitions based on who you're talking to. But what's your definition of a culture?
Sure. So if it's anything different than this, then they're clearly wrong and they don't know what they're talking about. But
okay. Thank you very much. Drop the mic. We're done. No. Okay. Got it. Go.
Culture is the norms and the behaviors and the unseen things that happen or don't happen when we get our work done. Now, sometimes people think that it's how it makes you feel. That's a byproduct of culture, but it's the norm. So, I can go up the elevator, go on the 8th floor, and there's a vibe in the room. And if you need to get stuff done, you go talk to your boss, you work with your team, and it's all cool. You get on the elevator again, you go to the 9th floor, and you don't hear a sound, and everyone's afraid. And you don't do anything without getting that one boss's approval every single time, and you're being micromanaged to death. Same company, 2 different floors. The culture of the company's the same, but you can feel the vibe. And so it's how when something bad happens, does my boss say, "Hey, let's figure it out, let's fix it," or is it someone's head's gonna roll? Right. And so it's those. We know it's the norms, it's the beliefs, it's the how things get done. It's there are those very specific things that really build what that culture is, whether it's on the micro level inside your team or the macro level inside your company.
So I like what you just said about how things get done. So I got a definition that's almost similar to yours. So thank God we're aligned there. We can
There we
still have
go.
this
I don't have to tell
conversation.
you wrong.
I know. And I would have to tell you're wrong if you told me that was wrong. Anyway, so, but I do think that culture has something to do with the way the work that we're doing. There is a connection to the work, to your point, how things get done. So in one way, you're sort of saying that it's the unseen things, which would indicate it's hard to measure, but it's also the seen things in that we are doing certain things at work that we could measure. So how can we measure a high performing culture then, if some of what we are noticing is the unseen?
Yeah, and so it does get to be a little bit tricky because we can measure outcomes, we can measure engagement, we can measure retention of key staff, we can measure our overall productivity, performance, and profits as an organization. Those are all things that we can measure. But we can also kind of measure the wrong things sometimes. It's like I remember guy told me, I have this, great employees, they do a great job, they're working really hard, but like lately I've been like losing some of my key people. And I go in and I try to figure out what's going on. And he's got everyone working like, 80 hours. They are so overstretched and they're high performers and they're getting a ton done because they believe the company can't afford the resources, can't hire more people. They can just hold on another day and be a top performer. And then they burn out and they go away. Right. And so he was measuring performance and how much work they got done, as opposed to like, are they getting great work done? And are we also doing things to help retain them? Because once he started losing them, his business started falling off because he couldn't get those same great people back in the seats who knew what they were doing. So we have to be like really, really careful about how we measure that high performance part. And it's a combination of, yes, they're getting great work done. Are they mentally healthy? Are we able to make sure there's a proper work-life balance that is set up, that we care about the human being, we care about the person in a way that we want them to be able to stay here as long as it makes sense for them to stay here? Or not a burnout thing, not where we just use them, grind them up and chew them and spit them out and bring in somebody else, right? That's not going to be good. And then, of course, is the organization ultimately hitting its goals? And are we having good profit numbers and things like that?
There's sometimes you find that the work-life balance is counter to the mission of the organization to be able to get work done. I mean, that we're understaffed. I was just talking to a healthcare company recently, and they've got two people that just left the finance department. They're grinding it. They got to work hard. They got deadlines. They got all sorts of stuff happening, and yet they're starting to feel a little frayed at the edges. And so, in that kind of a context or that scenario, how do you continue to build culture when you have not enough people to do the work? You got demands that the market is creating on you to get things done, where some people would say, man, that sort of feels like two separate, unaligned goals. Great culture to work at or getting work done. Which one do I choose? Well, money in the end of the day is going to keep us employed. So we're going to have to lead in that direction. How would you respond to somebody who says that?
Yeah, I mean, we ultimately see that the best organizations make sure that there are guideposts and limits, and we don't allow people for a long period of time to have to work in an environment where it's outside of what we would expect them to normally do. Yes, those emergency situations, you lose someone, you got to step in. Maybe there's a huge project and you've got to, do extra hours and do extra stuff. But if that's the case, or if that's the norm, I mean, I've worked with organizations where it's the norm for them to have a really big project and everyone have to burn the midnight oil, and then there'd be a dip. What do you do during the dip time? Are you giving people extra time off? Are you allowing them to go and basically retool and re-energize? And then, I think about law firms that have like really big cases. And so they'll have these times where they build up and they're in court and they're all working 80 hours a week. But like when it's dead time, what are you doing?
Right.
And so there can be natural ebbs and flows for organizations, but for the most employees, it is, I'm going to come in, I have my hours, I do my job, and so I can step in and help you when you need a little extra help. But if you're going to keep doing that over and over again because you just don't want to hire somebody, or you don't know if that work's going to last, like you're going to lose your best people, which ultimately costs you way more money than you would have hired that person.
I know back in 2008, when we had the big recession, there was up to that point an uptick in engagement worldwide. And then right after that, somewhere around 2009, 2010, it went down. And the analysis was basically we worked our ass off to get you through this recession,
Hmm.
company A, B, or C. Now that we're out of it, we deserve something in return and we're not getting it. So now our engagement is going down. We were talking before we started this interview that the Gallup organization just announced another big dip in overall engagement. What's your take on that? Why is that? Why is engagement so low right now? What's your sense about the causes and what can organizations do to reverse that external trend?
I mean, this is really a symptom of American society. So we would have to really get into like sociological, philosophical, political conversations around why do Americans view themselves, their identity through their job? Because that's not how it is in the rest of like, the sophisticated world of first world countries. Most people do a job and they like it or they don't like it or whatever, but like their identity is not their job. And so they have no problem taking vacation. They have no problem, being able to turn off that phone or that laptop because they're going to go spend time with their family and their friends or whatever. They have a balance that is, as a society, built in. Whereas here, it is built in that you overwork, you grind, you hustle, you do all these things. And that's what makes you you, right? I work 80 hours at my job. I'm a hard worker. That's my badge of honor. I'm a
Mm,
crappy father. I'm a crappy brother. I'm a crappy son. I'm a crappy what neighbor. But I worked 80 hours this week and I worked really
mm,
hard. And that's somehow our badge of honor as Americans. And, you know, will that ever change? I don't know. But then you're seeing like the opposite, right? It's like they're totally unhappy. My identity is my job, but I don't like my job. And I don't like any of
right.
the people I work with. And my boss is a total jerk, but I worked 80 hours this week. I worked really hard. So there's some weird like thing happening there where we need to detach and we've seen some of this. It was the whole like lazy girl jobs movement. I don't know if you follow TikTok much.
No,
Um,
that's
there was a whole like thing about like just find a job that you like enough to go in, do a good job, you do your hours, and then like that's your job, and then you go do your other stuff, and like that's it. And
yeah,
everyone like freaked out. Oh, they're lazy, but they just want to go do their job to make the money, pay their bills, and then like go live the rest of their life. Like the rest of
yeah,
the world kind of views work. And people were like, it was a backlash.
yeah.
That they didn't want this huge promotion and career trajectory and to climb the ladder and to be a gazillionaire, which for most people never happens. But there's this like dream they're being sold. So how do we uncouple that? To answer your question, how do companies deal with that? Well, companies need to have real conversations with their people and say, what is it you really want out of this job? Do you want to climb the ladder? Cool. Do you want to learn more? Do you want to work? Great. Do you want to just stay and plateau because like you got a family and you're not looking to add more hours? I used to have conversations with my people and they was like, I'm happy where I'm at. I don't want to move up. Like this is enough for me. And it was like, great, thanks for being honest. Now I know. I mean, you're happy where you're at. We're going to keep working. But the goal is not for you to one day be the supervisor of your department. And that's
In
not what
that
we're going
in
to change to do.
and in that scenario, can you still create a high performing culture?
Absolutely, because they now are focused solely on doing the best job possible in that job. And there
Mm,
isn't this undue outside pressure of, but why don't you want to progress? Why don't you want to learn new things? Why don't you want to be the boss one day?
yeah,
And like, I don't want to be. That's not
right,
my thing right now. Maybe in 10 years when my kids go off to college, maybe then I will want to do that.
right.
But right now, like 40 hours is enough. I'm cool. I want to go coach baseball and I want to, be around, actually see my kids grow up, or maybe I have a spouse that has health issues. I can't do more than that. Like whatever their life is. So it's having real conversations with people about where they are in their life and what they really want right now. And then as the employer, being okay with that.
And so I was thinking about a interview that I had. I think it was just yesterday, or the day before, about somebody who said I couldn't even tell me She couldn't even tell me. I forgot to ask where she got it, but we are now 30 or 33% less employees in the workforce than we had prior to COVID, which means we still have that many jobs. We just have 33% less people. So it creates a tremendous pressure on organizations in order to fill positions. And in this case, we might need to promote some people in order to fill positions of people who are now baby boomers who are now heading off to Chicago and doing their thing. And so there's got to be at some point a little bit of a push me, pull you. Like I got an employee who may not want to grow into leadership, and yet we need somebody in that position. We're not seeing it in the market. We're not seeing it on our teams. So how do we then support these people? I sense that strain. I'm wondering whether you do.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a little suspicious of that number because we have to make sure that we're accounting for people who left the traditional workforce and went in to become freelancers.
Agreed.
Business owner, like a small business, like if they decide there is a number of, haven't seen a increase in the unemployed disability. Like those numbers are relatively static, like since the pre-COVID numbers. And so I imagine a lot of those people just sort of left traditional 9 to 5 and now they're like
It's
doing
very
their own
possible.
thing, right?
It's possible.
So, but your question is how do we develop leaders? How do we find those people? And I love to introduce my clients to this concept of the part-time leader. And what we typically do is we run out there trying to find somebody who has half a brain and a lot of enthusiasm. And we're like, you could be a leader one day. I'm going to take you from no training and a little bit of aptitude, and now you're in charge of 30 people. Go. And they either become a terrible boss because they don't know what they're doing, or they burn out and they leave or whatever. And so instead, there's a whole lot of people who are afraid to become leaders. It's not on their agenda. It's not how they view themselves. And yet we know, we've been around and we know they'd be a great leader. We know they're conscientious. We know they care about people. We know they're good listeners. We know they work hard. And yet they don't see themselves as a leader. And so what we want to do is go and ask them to take on a project, to try being a leader in a kind of like a single serving type scenario. So we're not, because they're far more willing to say, oh, sure, I will go and run that team for 3 weeks and we'll try to figure out this problem or this software we need to get or whatever. And then to be able to give that person that feedback. How did it go? How did you like working with people and being in charge? Oh, it was better than I thought. Ah, okay. What did you like? What didn't you like? Where do you feel like your holes are? And then suddenly you give them a little bit of training and a little bit of encouragement. And then they go, oh, maybe I can be a leader. Maybe I am that person. I mean, some of my best leaders, some of the people on my senior management team when I sold my company are people who I don't want to say tricked into becoming leaders, but like basically baited them in to be part-time leaders. And they said, no, 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 no. And I was like, just have this little, just a little sample.
More so. Yeah.
And then they were like, I kind of like it. This is great. Like, this is not as bad as I thought it was going to be, and then they turned out to be great leaders.
Chris, are we kind of leader fixated? Is everything seem to be just focused back on the leader? I'm wondering as you were talking about this, is that the art of followership? I mean, there's something to be said for being a member of a team who collaborates well, who has all the emotional intelligence, who aligns their work well with other people, but is not a leader, which one would say maybe that's sort of the bread and butter of how the engines of a business run. Certainly the leader might help coordinate that, support that, but when it comes down to the work happens at the team level. What's your take on that? Are we overemphasizing leadership and not enough followership and team membership?
Well, let's define what we mean by leader. So a leader is somebody who is ultimately in charge, that something gets done. They may be the person who the team can go to or get help from or access to. They are not necessarily the person who rides in on a horse and is the ultimate extrovert and is this big, boisterous, person. And I think we sometimes have this idea in our head of that person. And we don't think of a leader and we think of some very loud CEO.
Right.
Most leaders are not that person. And so you don't need to be that person. You can just be willing to be responsible, be willing to take on, hey, I'm going to go try to get this group of people to go do this thing together. And you can do that by being one of many in that team. You can be in a group. You don't have to be the biggest voice. You don't have to be the strongest. I mean, I have led Scrum and Agile groups of people who are doing like engineering and software development. I came in and did like a little Scrum Master for a couple of months, and I had absolutely no idea what they were talking about.
Hmm.
I had absolutely no idea what they were doing. I had no technical capabilities like they did, but I could just step in and help facilitate them in a way that was not me taking over, because they knew gazillions more than I did. But it was just my job to make sure the project got done, and we moved things along. So I think if we reframe what we mean, the second part, I think, was what you were getting at about having better team members. We definitely can do that by making sure we are highly transparent and that we are providing really good opportunities for people to be heard. And so when we do that, they know the information we know, and we're hearing what they have to say, and we can ultimately be really good stewards of that experience for them to be great team members. Otherwise, you're not going to listen to me. I don't know any information. You're going to leave me out here on a sit by myself and try to do my work. Screw you, buddy. I'm not going to help you. I'm just going to sit here and be a bad team member.
Right.
And that's our job as leaders to fix that.
Yeah, I agree, 100%. One of the things that have happened over the last year, several years, was COVID, and a lot of people needing to and forced to work from home. And a lot of organizations are still in somewhat of a hybrid mode. How, in this day and age, which seems to be a new skill for leaders to work with people who are quote unquote at work and who are working from home, how do they best do that? How do we be able to build culture when half the people are on Zoom and the other half are sitting right next to me?
Yeah, I mean, so I've written a couple of books on this, so maybe I'll just pick.
I know, that's why I was teeing you up.
Yeah, one or two little things. I mean, there's a lot in there, right?
There's a lot to it,
but if I wanted to build culture, there are probably two things: a big thing and a tactical thing that I would do right away. The big thing is to be as transparent as possible. So the more information I can provide my people, the better off, the better decisions they can make, the more they're going to feel ownership on what's happening, the more that they're not going to feel blindsided by what's happened in the organization. If I'm constantly, as the leader, showing up and saying, this is what I know, this is what we're doing, this is the information I have today, and it might change tomorrow, then that's okay. But today, here's what I got. People feel safe, they feel much better, they feel like they can communicate, and it creates a much better environment. The second thing I would do is to make sure that you are taking care of your people's well-being. And there's a really great exercise called bonding. And we would do this once a day, only with your team, the people you work with all the time. And you get on a call, whether you're in person or you're on a Zoom or half and half, it doesn't matter. And you go around the room and ask, how are you showing up today? Now, it will take them a few tries, maybe even a few weeks, to really get good at this, to really start telling you the truth. But how are you showing up? And you might get answers like, I didn't tell you this, but I got a puppy right here at my feet, and she's sleeping, and hopefully she doesn't wake up during this podcast. But I'll tell you, every night I had to keep having to wake up at 3 a.m. to go take her to the bathroom. So like, I'm a little more tired than I normally am, right? So I might have shared that in a group meeting. I'm a little more tired. I got a puppy at home, and people go, oh, that's why your work's a little slower. That's why you're a little cranky. Aha. So I kind of know what's going on with you, and maybe I can help you, or I can be more empathetic. You make it, hey, I landed the big account, and it's a great day. Okay, let's celebrate that for a minute. Those little moments on the team. Then at the end of the meeting, you ask, how are you leaving?
How are you leaving?
How are you leaving? And so the first question, it tends to be like me as the whole person. But when I say, how are you leaving, it's always them as the employee. And so they'll say things like, I used to be like, I have run the best meeting ever. I'm a genius CEO. I've come up with the most amazing solution with my team. Hey, everyone, let's go get this done. How are you leaving? And they go, I don't know if this is going to work. Or I'm a little afraid the client's not going to like this. I don't know if we're ready to go deploy this solution yet. I'm like, oh. So here I was thinking we were on the same page, and you're telling me you're leaving this meeting apprehensive. You're not quite sure. Maybe we need to have in the meeting. And so if I hadn't asked that question, I would have thought, how come no one's getting this thing done?
Yeah.
My people don't like me. They're not listening to me. They don't respect me. No, they're just not there yet. They haven't been convinced, or there's something else we need to work out before we go do this thing. The last part of this is that if whoever is the most senior people in the meeting, you've got to go last.
Yes.
So
100%.
do not say, how are you all showing up? I'm me, CEO. I'll go first. I will show you how this is done. No, no. Because if you go around the room and your people are struggling and you've got, I'm tired, I'm overworked, I'm over, I have a sick spouse at home, I've got the puppy, like your team's like a little bit on edge, that's when you say, you know what? Let's not have this meeting right now. Let's talk about how I can support you. How can I get you resources? Maybe that person needs to take the rest of the day off. Like, and that moment of, hey, I care about you and I'm going to help you and I'm empathetic to you, that creates culture. That
Agreed.
shows them in this moment when everything's gone to hell in a handbasket, I'm going to help you as your boss.
Yeah. Yeah. I think there's a great quote. I forget. I think it was Adam Grant. Okay, what was it? He was talking about, I think it was called hippo, but basically the person who, the most dangerous voice in a meeting is the hippo, the highest paid person's opinion. So
Yep.
your point's really well taken. I think that's excellent. And that's a great exercise that you can use whether you're in a live setting or whether you're with a virtual setting. What's your opinion? You wrote a book on it. Can we create the same depth of human connection in a virtual setting as we do in a live setting?
So I will say that I found that we actually created a better culture and better bonds and a better working environment when we went fully remote with my organization, but it was hard. So it wasn't easy. So you can do a mediocrely okay job by being in person. It's pretty easy to do. It's a little bit harder to do it remote, but I think it actually ends up being better because we had to create more frameworks. We had to meet more intentionally. We had to do things more intentionally that allowed us to like take it to the next level. So if you're going to do remote and you're not going to try very hard, it's going to be pretty crappy.
But is it the fact that the remote environment forced you or you chose to be more intentional about creating culture?
Yes.
Could you not create an even better culture if you were to be as equally as intentional in a live setting?
I think if we had been as intentional, I don't think that it would have been at best, it would have just been equal.
Okay, fair enough.
Because there is something about not having to sit in traffic for 2 hours. Now, I don't know where everybody else is at, but I'm in Orange County, I'm near LA.
Yeah,
Sitting in traffic for 2 hours each way will make you want to blow your head off. I mean, does not set you up for a good day at work. You know what I mean?
No.
So working from home for a lot of our people was an automatic stress reducer.
Right.
Which is huge.
Right. Well, I heard, again, this was closer to our days of COVID, and I think it was another Gallup survey that said that the engagement levels were the best when you gave employees a choice to work from home or work from work, where there was some flexibility. But when you mandated it, it didn't turn out quite as well when it came to the overall scores. So what other types of ways can we create culture when we have a virtual or a hybrid environment? Since you seem to have written some books on it, I love your exercise. What other things should we intentionally do to be able to create culture when we don't have everybody together?
Yeah. So when you don't have, you can do this hybrid, you can do this remote, but if you have like different locations that may be in the same, they may be in place, but they're different cities or something like that. What we find is that people get stuck trying to get the work done. And so if you're all in an office together, I can walk down the hall and like talk to you and you'll say, oh, I'll go talk to Bob after lunch. And then like after lunch, I notice that you're kind of come back from that direction talking to Bob. So I can go talk to Bob now and move that project along or whatever. There is some visual sight things that happen, where I know something has happened based on things I can observe visually. That doesn't happen in remote or hybrid work or multiple office work. And so what ends up happening is I start dialing people one-on-one and like calling them and trying to figure it out. Or I spend hours on Google trying to figure the problem out myself because I don't have that person next to me in the cubicle farm or in a conference room just to ask, hey, you know where I do this thing or how do I solve this problem?
Mm-hmm.
And so this was the first big thing that we had to fix. We had to create something called a cockroach meeting.
Hmm.
So imagine you have a cockroach in your bathroom. It's a very small problem. You may not want to be the one who cleans it up, but like it's one issue, one problem. We can very quickly go in, get that cockroach, get it out, and be done. So we gave everyone the ability to call a cockroach meeting. So anyone can call the meeting. They can invite anybody they want, no more than 7 people. It's a 15-minute or less meeting, starts on time, always ends early. You never add more agenda items. You never bring anything else up. There's no pleasantries. There's no how's everyone's day. It's, hey, I got this thing. You get on the phone. Hey, a client just called and they want me to send them this form. I have no idea where to find that. Do we do that? Oh, yeah, yeah. Talk to this, talk to that. Cool. Thanks, guys. Off the phone.
Hmm.
That saved hundreds of meetings. That saved like so many hours of work because people were stuck not knowing they would have to wait until they talked to their team once a week or talk to their boss once a week to get that answer. And everyone was stuck. The whole thing, the whole ball of momentum started breaking down in our organization. And so as soon as we empowered people, the cockroach meeting was the first one. Then we had ostrich meetings and tiger team meetings and tsunami planning meetings. Started giving all these names to meetings so people knew how to act, what was going to happen, what they could do, what they could not do. And that allowed them to stop in all these little tiny one-on-one conversations and bouncing around and being totally ineffective.
So the cockroach meeting, if I were to call one, I would obviously need to make sure that people could attend it. I mean, they may have other meetings going on, so we got to find a time that we're all going to be available. So it could be at the end of the day during a lunch or what have you. That's what you're saying.
Yeah. So some people have access to their whole team's calendars or other people's calendars. They could go in and they could figure that out and say, hey, I noticed everyone's free at 1 today. If you really are available, can you hop on this call? Yeah. Again, it's optional and you can say no. If you don't want to go, if you don't have time, if you got some other thing, you just say no and that's okay. Yeah. We all know that this is an optional meeting. Yeah. When we started this, we didn't have that visibility on calendars and we would just be like, hey, people, I need some help. Who can help me at 1 o'clock? And like 4 or 5 people would raise their hands. Okay, cool. And they'd send the invite out and they would just meet. So you figure out how to get that done.
Understood. So within these virtual meetings, do you have any particular recommendations for your readers or for the listeners in terms of things like these types of software programs are great, or you should make sure that you have this sort of tool within Zoom, or tips of the trade around being able to have these meetings, which is based on technology, to make them most effective?
So I always go in the order of you got to have it's people, process, tools, technology. So do you have the right people in the meeting? And are we excluding people who do not need to be in that meeting, but maybe only need to know the outcome? If they only need to know the outcome, don't invite them. We don't need more voices. We don't need more opinions. Just bring the people who need to be there. That's the people part. The process is make sure we start on time. Make sure we end early. Make sure we stick to the agenda. Make sure we do not bring in other items. Make sure that we know exactly what we're supposed to do next, who's supposed to do what, and then we have a clear understanding of what that is, and hopefully avoid having to have another meeting. Like that should be, can we meet once? Like that is the gold standard. Can we meet one time and figure this out and get everything set up and we don't have to meet another time?
Yeah.
Because we all have 1,000 meetings. And the goal of the meeting should not be let's set another meeting. There are people who are habitually stuck in the habit of having meetings, and that somehow justifies their job. So that's the process part. Now the tools, sure, you can use Miro boards, you could use Google Docs, you could use anything that will allow you some tool to document, take notes. I mean, I love it that I've got a Fireflies AI or Otter AI. I've got a note taker and immediately sends it out to everybody and they can go back and listen and watch. Those are cool pieces of tools and technology that will help you be better at meetings. But again, if you screw up the people in the process, I don't care what tool or technology you bought, your meetings are going to suck, they're going to be ineffective, and no one's going to get anything done.
And wasn't there another one after tools?
Technology. So that could just be, are you using the Zoom platform? Are you using Teams? Are you using, what is the technology that where you meet? And certainly we've seen companies that are hybrid have really good technology with the way that their screens are, where there's some really cool webcams. that will actually show you the whole conference table. It'll like integrate with the
Hmm.
Zoom. I mean, there's some really cool technologies if if you find yourself you're meeting in a conference room and you're meeting with a fully remote team or half remote team, there are some cool technologies, but
Yeah.
for most people process, and then the tools would just be like the note takers and the mural
Right.
boards and stuff like that. That's important.
Yeah. So one of the things that we started off talking about is how leadership has changed a bit based on external forces. One of them being, hey, now we're having to do things remotely because of a lot of people working from home. Another one seems to be around ChatGPT and AI and the speed of that into the workforce and those tools, those technologies becoming, you know, really a ubiquitous conversation. I was even talking to somebody today, like, do we need to hire somebody who becomes an expert on our team just to be able to stay up on all this stuff? How should leaders be thinking about that technology as a tool to be able to create culture? Not to say that it's not more important than people and process, I get it, but how much attention should we be paying to that?
So I'm really focused on a lot of my keynotes, trying to help people embrace the future of work more so than I am trying to teach them how to use ChatGPT or how to use AI or any of these different tools. Because some of us are really interested in that and are going to go figure that out and going to do that. And other people are just going to be the beneficiaries of our curiosity and our hard work. What I'm more worried about is that the cycles of change keep getting smaller. So the amount of change that happened in my great great grandfather's life was like, we have steam and now we have electricity. That was the big change.
Right.
Everything else didn't change. But in my lifetime, I've seen the internet, I've seen cell phones, now I've seen AI, I've seen the Internet of Things. I've seen so much change in my lifetime that is more total change than like the last few generations combined.
Correct. Yep.
And so, how do people handle that? How do you prepare yourself mentally to deal with that and also to be successful in your work and in your life when change happens so much more rapidly than it ever has before? And so that's where I think companies and employees and leaders should really be interested in helping their people be successful, is accepting, digesting, and being able to react to change, not so much in being able to do the thing, because there will
Understood.
always be experts. There will always be people who can help us with that. There'll always be great YouTube videos or things like that that can help us learn if it's really something we need to do. But it's
So,
that fear we have to
well,
deal with.
so let's go down that path then for a second. Then, how do we train? How do we encourage teams and leaders to adapt, to be agile, to work with that speed of change? I mean, I think, I mean, I'm not a neurological, a brain surgeon or anything, but just the brain's ability to take in information and to simmer on it and then to be able to make sense of it, to process it.
Yeah.
I don't think it's at the pace at which external change is coming to us. So most of our time is spent actually avoiding the change that's coming to us because we can't take it all in. How do we then speed up our our ability to take on all this change and make
Yeah.
sense of it?
So in part, it's being able to have some exposure to some of the new things that are happening in a positive way. So can we show our teams, train our teams, interact with our teams in some way with something that's not too hard, not too nefarious, not too challenging, so they get some perspective on maybe what it can do and what we might think about doing, and then to skip to the end and try to help them understand strategically what this means and
Mm,
avoid all the middle stuff, because the middle is the stuff that keeps changing every day.
right,
And those people that are following this and are really on top of it are great because they're following the middle, but the middle, the target keeps moving. And
right.
so it's better they understand what, and then they understand why,
Why?
and spend a lot less time on how. And that will help them get interested and process where they need to be. And some of them will get really curious about the how, and that's cool and that's great. And some of them will be like, I don't care, but at least I can think about the strategic why part and how that might impact our business, so that we can say we should go hire this firm or bring in this consultant or, hire this person to come help us deal with this challenge, even though I don't necessarily know how to do it yet.
So going back to the speed of change, and one of the things might be technology, and one of those things might be, say, for example, AI. I may not necessarily have to understand how to do it, but why we might want to use it, why it could be beneficial for our company. I'm thinking about healthcare is now thinking about how that could be transformed by AI, advanced learning, and so forth. But why spend a lot of time understanding the details of it? Because it's going to change every day, every month.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Very good. Excellent. Yeah. Well, Chris, this is fascinating. I love this conversation. I mean, we could keep going on, probably for another couple of days on it, but you've got a lot out there. You do a lot of public speaking. You've got a couple of books. Tell the people who are listening in on this how they can follow you and learn more about your work.
Sure. So if you're on any of the social media platforms, I'm probably there. I'm happy to connect with you. If you don't know where to start, go to my website, chrisdyer.com. If you're real fancy, you can text 33777 and then type in my name, Chris, and it'll immediately get us connected. You can be on my mailing list. I'll send you resources for free. There's lots of cool stuff there. I've got a ton of content on Instagram and TikTok and all that. So if you want to go learn more and pick up some of my tips there, happy to have you join the conversation.
Do you also do large public speaking for just companies, or is it, the rank and file person out there wants to come and hear you?
Yeah, I mean, so I speak at a lot of conferences every year. So if they're involved in a conference where I'm at, that's easy. I speak to a lot of large organizations and helping them and their teams. I speak at leadership retreats and conference and company retreats. I've even done like offsites. And so if they have a need like that, I'm happy to help. I can't think of like a public thing like where anyone could just walk in off the street.
But like Tony Robbins kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, even then you got to pay to go see Tony. But, I have a lot of stuff online. I've got a TED Talk about mistakes. If they want to go check that out, that's a full speech. They could go find that on the TED website. So,
great.
Yeah.
And let me ask you the last question. What's your favorite speech that you've given lately that you felt you just nailed it?
Recently I gave a talk to the AI CPAs, a big CPA firm. And so we talked about how to transform your company culture. And from the perspective of a group of people whose ultimate job is finance and is about keeping the company's financial integrity in place. But how do they impact culture? And how do they, really put those things forward when they're not HR and they're not the CEO? And how do they help create a new type of organization or a better organization? And so I really love talking to them. It was a really fantastic group. It was out in Charleston. And I was so honored they're having me come back and speak to them again in December. Fortunately, a lot closer in San Diego.
Yeah.
That was a great one. I'd probably number 2 would be, I do a Mastering Tough Conversations keynote. And I did it to a room full of, 5,000 entrepreneurs. And it was just all people who had done all the stupid things I'd ever done. Hire family, hire your friends, have a business, not really create all of the structure and the rules. You just start flying on, the seat of your pants and have a good idea and you start a business and you make every mistake in the world. And then you got to figure out how to have that tough conversation with someone to fix it, make a change, do the right thing. And so that was a really fun one too.
Awesome. Well, Chris, it's been a real pleasure getting to know you and understanding more about your perspective. I definitely took a bunch of notes based on our conversation.
Thanks. I appreciate having me on, Dean.
You bet.
Thank you for listening to The Business of Intuition. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe, rate, and review on Apple Podcasts, Google, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. If you'd like to learn more about Dean or Mission Facilitators Leadership, go to mfileadership.com. That's mfileadership.com.